A bit closer. Okay, thanks for the invitation. Thanks also to GPS that has made possible for me to be here, second time. And I'll be talking about this. You probably know the ancient Greek myth of Narcissus. This is in a painting by the Italian painter Caravaggio. So it's an interesting story that has arrived until today, because the story goes, there are a few versions, but Narcissus looks at himself in his reflection in water and falls in love with himself to the point that he cannot get away from the image of himself on the pond and gets stuck in looking at himself, lost in love and affection for his own face, and eventually falls in the water and dies. So now, one interpretation of this is that Narcissus is a very, very beautiful person. And he falls in love with himself because he's so exceptionally beautiful that no one else could possibly match his beauty among everyone else in the world. So perhaps this is a very special case that does not apply universally to everyone. However, if we go back maybe a century ago, I think we get to an idea which is aptly expressed by Emily Bronte in her novel Jane Eyre, that she wrote just 1 year before she died, well, at least was published 1 year before she died, where one of the characters at some point says this very famous sentence: "Most true is that beauty is in the eye of the gazer." It's often cited in the eye of the beholder, but the origin is actually in the eye of the gazer, which sounds much better, actually. And this idea is that essentially we have standards of beauty that are very personal, very individual, very, very much idiosyncratic, based on our own personal experiences. This idea, which is influential and we can understand, we often don't understand why some people like each other, okay? Why do they find each other attractive and so on? But it goes against the grain of a lot of current psychological work, which actually, where the prevalent idea is universality. So for example, and I'm not going to contest this, of course there is very strong evidence that there are universal traits that we react to, probably because this sense of beauty is not only common among a lot of people, but it's actually shared across culture because it depends on the perception of biological relevant features, biologically relevant traits. For example, things like the proportions of parts of the body and the face, the relative size of these parts that may differ between men and women for, again, biological reasons, since they may send different signals about fertility in women or health in men and so on. But these tend to be quite constant across culture in space and time. Yet, we know also from quite a bit of psychological research in particular, that a phenomenon that is quite widespread is that members of a romantic couple often resemble each other. There is quite a bit of empirical evidence about this. Perhaps you can even think of people you know that look almost like siblings. So these two people, just one example, they look like brother and sister, but they're not. Okay? They're just two people who look a lot alike. And this would seem more consistent with a less universal type of standard, a standard which is based on some information which we may be actually born with and differing from individual to individual. So, in one study, Alvarez and Yaffe did an interesting experiment where they collected pictures, photos of couples, people who were married with each other, several of them, and and show them to another group of people who didn't know these people at all. And it was a little bit of a game. And so you see a picture of, for example, someone, and then a man, and then 6 pictures of different women. And the game is to match the one that you think looks the most like the sister of that particular person. Or you can change the question, and you can ask them to choose, again, it's the same stimuli, the same faces, and you ask them now to choose the one that you think are most likely to be the wife of that particular person, okay? When you do that, turns out that the hit rate is exactly the same, and in fact, the type of matches are very, very similar. So that at least suggests to us that we tend to expect a high degree of physical similarity between partners. And indeed we find it. So celebrities, this is a bit of a showcase of examples. One could argue that while celebrities often, this is Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, they might look a lot alike to you. They look alike. This is actually Jessica Alba, that may look a bit like her. Perhaps all the very attractive people look alike because they approximate this prototype of the correct proportion that we find universally as a standard of beauty. So that this sort of narcissistic matches happen only at the upper level of the higher place. But actually, it's observed at every level. So no matter what is the level of attractiveness, there is a tendency, as you see often in the media, in these cases. So again, 2 celebrities, Mick and Bianca Jagger, very similar to myself. I'll just stop this showcase with one final example, because it's quite revealing. This is a case actually of a particular type of pairing, because these are 2 homosexual men. Very, very famous story, recently appeared in a movie with Michael Douglas on Liberace. Okay, so Liberace was an entertainer, a showman, a musician, a singer, and this is his lover. Okay, but at the time, of course, they couldn't openly reveal their relationship. So he mentioned publicly that he loved him as a son, and he wanted him to be his son, if possible. So he had him take plastic surgery to change his face so that he would resemble his own face. So this is how he looked before he met Liberace, and this is how he looked after plastic surgery. So that, in effect, they look more genetically related than they did in the beginning. So in an experiment that we published a few years ago, we did a little bit of the same, not using, of course, plastic surgery, but using a type of virtual plastic surgery, which is called morphing, the morphing technique. So this is the face of one of my PhD students. In fact, she is the co-author of the first 2 studies that I'm going to talk about. And with this commercially available software, we can essentially blend one person with another picture and obtain a new version of it. Now, this picture in the middle is what we call the prototype. It's a morph of 100 Norwegian students at the university, okay, 2 universities in Norway. So it's very symmetric, very regular, and so on. By blending 50% of this, that we get an image that probably the majority of people, including this very same person that participated in the morphing procedure, would consider to be more attractive. In a way, we have done cosmetic surgery, and most interestingly is that you don't need an enormous amount of the prototype in order to beautify the face to a point that most people would give a higher ratings in attractiveness of that particular person compared to the original or compared to other types of norms. So this is the basis of the present technique. The idea that is well established that by blending an individual with a very symmetric proportional face as the universal standards of beauty tell us a very attractive person, we can step a little bit above the attractiveness of the person without necessarily losing the identity of that person. Or we can do the reverse. We can change a little bit the face of another person without people noticing that that face has changed a little bit. So we use three types of prototypes: the female prototype, the male prototype, and the androgen prototype, which is a blend of the male and female. So it's the ambiguous prototype. And it's important for us that we can control precisely how much of one particular individual contributes. So here in the 50%, it's quite clear to everyone who is the original face that comes into the morph. But with a decreasing amount, we reach a point in which the person still looks very similar to the prototype, but not identical to the prototype, and we are unaware of the original face. Why is this important? This is important because in study of attractiveness, we may respect what has probably occurred at the evolutionary point in the whole animal world, not just for humans. The existence of an optimal point, a balance between outbreeding and inbreeding. What we are doing here, in a way, we are creating images that are genetically related because they look alike in terms of phenotype to the original one. And we want a choice that falls between the possibility of allowing a little bit of similarity in breeding without looking too obviously similar to oneself or similar to kin, so as to avoid the inbreeding possibility. It will become a bit clearer as I show you the experiment itself. So we had 20 couples, men and women, together or married with one another. This is important because we know that these people are already sexually attracted to one another. So if any manipulation can reveal a change in attractiveness, we know that that is a variable that plays some kind of significant role. And we created 7 different images of the partner and asked to rank the images based on their attractiveness. We also show, as a control condition, the same set of faces, but of another couple. So a person that is not known or in any way related to each one of the participant couples. So here is an example. So this is one of the students. She has given permission to me to show her face and that of her husband. So this is the original face. And this is the face mixed with just 20% of the female prototype, 20% of the male prototype, the androgen prototype. The best, the male will get the highest rating in attractiveness by a group of judges among the participants, and the most attractive female among the participants. And then the mirror image. So this is, in a way, by morphing a face with its own mirror image, you obtain essentially the original face, but a bit more smooth and symmetrical than the original one. But the crucial morph is the one called self. Because the one called self is the one that contains 20% of her husband's face. Okay, so this is the husband. And what you see there is her with a little bit of the husband's face. Just a little bit, so that not even the husband can tell that his face is in there. And we did the same, of course, with the husband. So this is the other side of it. In that way, we test both male and females in the same situation, in the same conditions, and so on. So, what we find is that when we look at ranking, so we are actually asked people, people got good color prints of all of these faces, and they had to order them from what they thought was most sexually attractive to the one that looked least sexually attractive. If we look first at what is called the other conditions, so these are couples judging other couples, okay? So we see that, as you would expect, blending the face of a woman, so these are the male participants, with the female prototype makes each face more attractive, as you would expect. This is not new, but it's important that we find that the morphs, the female, the androgen, and the male, have this power. They can do that, okay? But now, when we show these pictures to the actual partner, it's the self-morph that suddenly appears at the top of the ranking. So this is the most preferred, is the one that contains a little bit of yourself, of the person who is looking at. And indeed, the same picture, which is here called partner morph, because it's not anymore self, it's someone else's partner, is actually ranked as the least attractive. So there is a tremendous change in whether you're looking at someone you like with yourself versus you're looking at someone else that you have never seen before mixed with their own partners. Is that clear? And female participants show the same, so preference for the prototype morph, and which switches when they look at their own intra-pair comparison to the self-morph. And this is actually flipping to the bottom of the list when you look at someone else. So what does this tell us? Well, this indicates the presence of narcissism. Narcissism, a term made famous by Sigmund Freud. I'm not saying that we need to interpret this in terms of Freudian theory at all. What I'm saying is that if given the opportunity, one would prefer that the partner would look a bit more like her himself. A bit like Liberace did actually, physically. We managed that virtually. I think actually Freud, to be fair, I've got one thing right, because he came into debate with Westermarck. Westermarck was a Finnish anthropologist that at the time in which Freud was writing about narcissism had proposed what later became known as the Westermarck theory. The idea that there is essentially one mechanism, which is to reduce as much as possible the costs of inbreeding, that would create an innate response to people who look too close to you of avoidance when it comes to the sexual relationship and so on. Freud, in part, accepted that, but he also said that that cannot be the whole story. That there is also another part, which is the existence of individual attraction to people who look at you. And it's this part that I think that is quite interesting to see in this respect. We also thought that if it's true that there is a point in which attractiveness is optimal on the basis of similarity, then either increasing the amount of self contribution to the morph or decreasing it should actually represent a loss in the choices. So this is what actually we demonstrate here, that the self 32% morph is best liked, but the one that looks a bit too much as ourselves is actually the least ranked. and the 11 is probably too weak to win the competition with the prototypes that we know are strong elements in changing the level of attractiveness. Okay, so from there to there. The question is, why should there be, at that particular level, such an optimal point? It's not that I can give a precise answer to it, but there is some suggestion actually from studies of geneticists. So this study was published not a long time ago. This is the Icelandic group behind the Decode project, Alvesson and colleagues. And it's a unique situation because they have actually mapped the genetic information of the whole population of Iceland, going back to 200 years. So, so that they can retrace for each particular individual, and they have very good documentation of the demographics of the population. They can retrace what is the actual amount of relatedness of each of the individual involved, of each of the couples that are married, and they have had children and grandchildren and so on, because this goes back many generations, all this database. And it's very interesting to do that, to look at this, also because the findings were extremely counterintuitive. What they found, so what you have here in all of these graphs, of the x-axis is the degree of genetic relatedness of the people that are that have reproduced with one another. So this level corresponds to the first, second cousin type of marriage, okay? And this level we are third to fourth cousin, and here fifth to sixth cousin, and then less and less relatedness to the point that this is basically there is no genetic, so it's like a randomly extracted individual from the population at the level of genetic relatedness that you have there. And what you see is that when we look at the number of children, actually, the more genetically related the two people are, the more likely to have more children than less genetically related. But most importantly, for the idea of an optimal point, is that in all the other measures, you can see that very closely related, like first cousin or second cousin, pay a cost, but suddenly at this level of third cousin or fourth cousin, also the number of grandchildren, so the number of children of the children that this couple would have is highest, and then it starts tapering down. Also the fertility of the children, of course these two are related with one another. And then when it comes to the lifespan, it actually reaches asymptote very early and then stays stable. So the question is it possible that somehow these payoffs that you have, that you know now you have, there are in the population with people who are genetically related, will have children and grandchildren, are they actually capable of exerting some pressure on what will be the choices of other people? And a more specific question is, how would this pressure operate, on which kind of signals would be able to operate? Like, for example, we have been talking all the time about similarity to one's own face, okay? But how do you know how your face looks like is a bit related to the previous question. How do you know what your face is expressing? In this case, how do you know how you look like? Nowadays we know, because everyone has mobile phones, selfies, the home videos, photographs all over the place, and we have mirrors. We look at the mirrors every day, I suppose. But mirrors have appeared quite recently. So is it possible that just exposure to mirrors would be sufficient? Well, think again of the myth of Narcissus. The myth of Narcissus is at least to 2,000 years old, before the time the mirrors, or actually mirrors as we know them, because there were some kind of mirrors at the time also, were available. But what the myth is telling us is that he's looking at his reflection in still water. And still water has been there since evolutionary time. Okay? So there is the possibility that our ancestors could have seen a reflection in still water. And that could have been the main mechanism for the development of self-imprinting, which would predate the use. So when mirrors, portraits, selfies, and so on came to the fore, that would boost a self-imprinting mechanism that is already existent. So one prediction would be that this effect of self-imprinting should be stronger today than it was in the past. But there is also another possibility, which again is a bit Freudian in nature, and is that, well, maybe you don't have a good knowledge of your own face. Can you hear me? Yeah. But you have very good knowledge of faces of those in your close proximity, especially as a child. And those would be your parents and your siblings. And are those, like it happens in many animal species, that may decide actually, in a way, who later could be a potential mate, who could be attractive. So there are studies with birds and lizards and fish showing exactly that. So we decided to put to test, and as far as we know, we were the first to do something like this with graphic manipulations to see whether morphing a little bit of the face of the father and the mother of a participant would actually change the level of attractiveness of a prototype morph. So a little bit of information, and pit that against the self-phenotype matching type of process. So here, again, this is just for demonstration. This is my student and co-author of the paper. This is her mother and this is her father. This is the female prototype with 20% of her own face. Female prototype with 20% of her mother's face. Sorry, no, they're all male prototypes, sorry. Male prototype, 20% self, 20% mother, and 20% father. And in addition, we have just the prototype without any manipulation. Here the prediction would be if any of these three wins the competition when doing the ranking against the prototype, then we would have evidence that there is an interest for that type of trait of information that would boost a little bit the sense of attractiveness that we know is already quite high in the prototype. What we found is that, again, it was the self-based morph that was ranked the best over the prototype, but definitely both the father and the mother, and this was in a group of people, were ranked the least. There is a problem with this experiment. It wasn't, we were not able to do the ideal design for this experiment. It got published probably because our reviewers thought that the idea was very interesting and stimulating, but we were all aware that there was a problem. We used photographs of the way the parents look today, not how the parents looked at the time when the participant was a child. Now, there is a group of researchers here in Tokyo, at Tokyo University, Nojo, Tamura, and Ihara, that have done something similar. They didn't use graphic manipulations, but what they did is to get pictures of participants and their parents when the parents were young. I suppose this is easier to do in Japan, because people are so happy in taking photographs of family pictures all the time. So everyone, each of you probably has a big database of family photos that go back many, many years. It was a bit more difficult to do that in Norway. But they could do it. And then they asked a group of independent judges to decide how similar, a bit like in the first experiment that I showed you, how similar they thought were these particular pictures, so that so as to reveal whether people could match the mother or father picture with the picture of actually the spouse of the participant. So that was the goal, is to find whether they would resemble the partner of the participant. And what they found is essentially no evidence for similarity with the parents, but strong evidence for similarity between couples, between two members of the real couple. I want to conclude with a first study, which is, again, I think, an example of this narcissistic type of attraction. But it's much more narrow, much more specific. It has to do with one single particular trait, a unique trait, which is the color of the eye, and in particular the blue eye. Now, blue in nature, and in particular when it comes to animals, is peculiar. Because when we look at the blue eye, actually, there is no color there. There is no blue color in the eye. There is no pigment. In fact, it's an absence of a color. What we see is what's inside the eyeball, which is just water. And because of the diffraction of light, short wavelength get more diffracted, then the eye gets the color. Just like the reason the sky is blue. The sky is blue not because there is blue in the sky, there is particles that are blue, it's because it's the Rayleigh scattering of the atmosphere that filters all the other wavelengths, and then we see blue. Okay? It's the same actually with the butterfly's wings. Those are crystal-like elements that reflect light, so there is no pigment there either. But Charles Darwin had already pointed out that color is very important in nature among animals. It has been modified for a special purpose. And there are essentially two possible evolutionary treasures. One is natural selection. The color is useful to protect yourself from predators, and that is the case of camouflage, okay? To make yourself not visible. And then there is the opposite, is sexual selection, in which you make yourself as visible as possible, as salient as possible, so that everyone will be looking at you. You will capture other people's eye, and most importantly, the eye and the attention of the opposite sex. And that becomes the selective mechanism. Okay, so a few examples. Here is a bit difficult to see where the animal is. It's a frog, it's right there. It blends with the environment, so this is a case of coloring by natural selection. And here is the opposite, where these animals are very easy to spot. And they're easy to spot despite the fact that they are risking their existence. In some cases, actually, like if the frog is ivipossumous, might want to advertise in order not to get eaten. So, but when it comes to other types of colors, that is well established, is usually due as a signaling for attracting the opposite sex, and also the right species. When it comes to eye color, blue eyes are very rare, actually, among mammals. Some cats have it, some dogs have it. It's usually the rule in the mammal group that the eyes are brown or dark orange. There are, in the primates, that's particularly clear. All apes have brown eyes. There is one exception, one subspecies of lemurs that live in Madagascar, which are blue-eyed. Although the genetics is very different from those of humans. We separated from them many millions of years ago. So the question is, why most people here are brown-eyed. Most Asians are brown-eyed. The great majority of individuals in the world are brown-eyed. Blue-eyed individuals are still quite rare. One of the reasons is that the trait appeared very recently. In fact, much more recently than many of us would have thought. Because the population genetics evidence is that it might have appeared no more than 10,000 years ago. Probably in a range of 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. And a few years ago, actually, they found a site in Spain called La Braña, and there were bones that contained DNA that was in good conditions, that we could actually retrace how the person who was dead there looked like. So they actually reconstructed the face. And two of the things that were some of the most reliable predictions that they would make based on the DNA is that this person who lived in Spain 7,000 years ago was dark-skinned and blue-eyed with a high probability. However, the highest frequency of blue-eyed people is not in Spain, it's in Scandinavia. In fact, there is a high concentration. The story goes that probably the first individual who had the blue-eye mutation lived here in this part of the Caucasus and Middle Eastern part, and then it spread in all directions. We have evidence from archaeology, in fact, within the time period of no later than 4,000 to 5,000 years, that there were blue-eyed individuals because they were represented in art. The Queen Nefertiti apparently was blue-eyed according to the crystals and pigments that was found in the sculpture. The usual explanation of why blue-eyed people appeared so late could be that if humans moved from Africa and then progressively more and more northern location, then they were released from a strong genetic pressure. The strong genetic pressure being a type of natural selection, where the pigment actually helps to protect the photoreceptors in the eye and also the skin itself. So darkness, this is the distribution of color of skin in the world. In areas where the ultraviolet light is very high, and it can be very damaging, particularly to the eye, to the lens of the eye most of everything, so that people in this tropical equatorial region develop cataract very early, unless they protect themselves. But moving up north, then the level of ultraviolet light goes down dramatically, then would be released from that, and then would allow the emergence of different eye color. So this is one part of the story. This would explain why that was more likely to appear and perhaps spread, but it wouldn't explain so well why the concentration of blue-eyed people tend to be in this particular region of the world. So this is the Baltic Sea, this is Scandinavia, these are the Baltic states. So 80% of individuals here are blue-eyed, and then it progressively goes down. In Italy, where I come from, and I'm a good example, 8 people out of 10 are brown-eyed. Okay, only 20% are. So the question is, why is occurred this particular concentration here? And one possible story that I didn't come up with is an anthropologist in Canada who suggested it. His name is Peter Frost. Is that if we go back to the time in which all of these events were taking place, between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, that is towards the end of the Ice Age. First of all, Scandinavia was my house, which is there, here, was under 1 kilometer of packed ice, and so on. This part, including this part of Spain, was tundra-like. And most importantly, the average temperature in the winter would be between -20 and -30. So it was a particularly hostile environment. Why humans moved there? They moved because they followed the cattle, especially deer, moving into those areas. And that was probably the only source of nutrition for these humans. Which means that there may have been, if we consider that was hunter-gatherer society, that in the low latitude continental tundra of Ice Age Europe, which was very much south of what is today tundra, there was a maize shortage among hunter-gatherers. Hunting was risky, which means high rate of deaths among young men. Gathering was very scarce, so the gathering, usually the contribution of the female part, is reduced in value, so there will be more reliance on hunting, and therefore a limited supply of potential husbands, many unmated women than men, and that in itself could lead to polygyny. But remember that resources are very scarce, so that means that the whole scenario could lead to a strong pressure on women in particular to find traits that could attract potential husbands. And this is the environment where traits like this, unusual hair color, blondness, redness, unusual eye color, green eye, blue eye, actually established themselves. And now we have that situation. Okay, this was a bit of a long story, but it was to introduce actually my final study, which, as the title suggests, that is actually the hypothesis, led us to think that if this is the situation, and given some basic inheritance law behind eye color, then one should be led to predict that blue-eyed men actually should prefer blue-eyed women. Why? Because turns out, according to geneticists, that the blue-eyed individuals are quite unique. They are, in fact, in a very unique situation. There is a concordance between the genotype and the phenotype, which rarely you have. Okay, in what sense? In the sense that if an heterozygous brown-eyed individual has an allele that is not concordant with observed eye color, but someone with the blue eyes has both alleles that are concordant. So, in other words, if two blue-eyed parents have a child, you can predict at a very high level of confidence, in fact, nearly perfect confidence, allowing for some mutations and unusual combinations or unusual colors that are difficult to classify. But two blue-eyed parents should have children that are blue-eyed. If that doesn't happen, that can potentially signal the presence of cuckoldry. And that doesn't happen in every other situation. So if one of the mechanisms in mate choice in males is that of promote the assurance of their paternity, which is not a problem for women, but it is a potential problem for men, to be sure that the child is your child, not someone else. That's called cuckoldry. Then the blue-eyed men should prefer and feel more attracted towards women with the same phenotype, because that increases their assurance of gender. So we decided to test this, and we decided to test this experimentally. So we showed a photograph of men and women, and in this case, this is a brown-eyed individual. But we manipulated, again, the image so that we changed the eye color. We left everything else the same, just the eye color different. And then we showed this picture to men and women in a cross design, so that one group would see the blue-eyed version, one group would see the brown-eyed version. You don't see both of them. And then rate how attractive they thought this person was. So we had a group of blue-eyed men, a group of brown-eyed men, a group of blue-eyed women, a group of brown-eyed women. We didn't expect the change in eye color to make much of a difference in these groups, except for one, the male group with blue eyes. So if we look first at the ratings of the female group, so the blue-eyed females, the brown-eyed females, looking at females or males with blue or brown eyes, we don't see any difference. So there is a lot of variability there. There is no clear preference for a particular version of the eye color. However, when we test the men, we see one group coming up, and that is the blue-eyed males. So these are all males, brown-eyed, blue-eyed. When they are rating, so they get 1 point if you want on the scale, but it's significantly higher when they look at the female model with blue eyes as predicted. We also wondered, okay, this is a situation in which we again made possible for people to evaluate changes, but the question is what happens in real life? Is it true that blue-eyed men actually tend to pair more frequently with the blue-eyed females? So we are in Norway there, so we have a population of about 60% of blue-eyed individuals, so it's a good place to study this. So here is the main participant. We asked every participant, and this is a large group, we're talking about hundreds of people, since it's just a questionnaire that they have to fill out, so it's easy to collect this kind of data. We asked them to tell us what was their own eye color and what was the eye color of their partner, wife, husband. If they didn't have any partner, which happens, what was the eye color of the previous partner? And so, and when we see the probabilities, indeed, there are lots of blue-eyed males that are together, at least in a temporal window very close to the type of testing, to blue-eyed females. Whereas for brown-eyed male, it doesn't make any difference whether their partner is, in terms of frequency, whether they're blue or brown-eyed. When we look at actually the contribution in these statistics of this particular type of combination is very high. If we do the same type of statistical analysis with the female participants, we find something quite similar in the sense, of course, because if the blue-eyed males are actively seeking female partners, then there would be a large number of these particular pairings out there. But the point is that there is room for choice still, and this type of associative mating is less strong. It's weaker when it comes to the female choice, as we predicted. Well, thank you for following with all studies so far, and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Very nice. If you have any questions, we can accept very quick questions.
At this point, it's just 60% in those regions. 60% in those regions. I was just going to say, obviously, if it gets to 90% at some point, then that advantage for the male cuckoldry goes away at some point. But I guess it never.
Yes, it's a type of frequency dependent sexual selection. So it's as strong as rare is in the population. But according to simulations of this, it should stabilize at some point depending on the payoff. And that could vary from country to culture to culture, according to rules that we don't even think about what they possibly do. But right now, last time I looked at the statistics, the blue-eyed population in Norway is about 60%. The highest is in Estonia, which is also on the Baltic, it's 90%. So 90% is as much as we have documented so far.
I'm one of those blue-eyed Iranians that you mentioned, by the way.
They moved back there. Yes, Mark is a good example.
Do you have any questions? Okay, so far, just leave it to the discussion section. Well, thank you very much for the moment.